All right, 1 minute early, but I take it. Yeah, thanks for having me. Thanks to Itemis for hosting this. This is amazing to have this space and have this event. And the first talk is not going to talk about Operaton at all. It's not always Cloud9 why we still need embedded process engines. I'm going to talk about personal anecdotes and try to come back to more generalized terms. So in the old times, when I started first working with BPMN, it was actually 2014. And I was a young consultant just stumbling into my first BPMN project. And in this BPMN project, we were not working with Camunda yet. We were working with IBM BPM. Just maybe short hands up, who has used that? Okay, cool. Many people. This talk is not going to trash that software. It does its job. It's a little bit unfortunate that I have experience with that and that I now can use it as an example why a centralized monolithic BPM system approach is not always the best. If you don't use it, it looked like this. This is a software which is running on WebSphere. Inside of WebSphere, there is the whole application, and you are writing business logic mostly with JavaScript and BPMN 2.0. If you want to talk to other systems, you cannot do this directly from the machine or very limited. There are some kind of connectors. But you need to write Java logic, which is running externally on another server, on another machine. And this Java code now can integrate with core banking, with the IBM iSeries, with databases, with everything you have and want to use. And which protocol did we use for this integration? Obviously, the most enterprisey protocol, it's SOAP. But now they can also talk REST, so they improved. And there is nothing inherently wrong with this approach. I'm not saying monolithic BPMN systems are a bad idea. We created a lot of value for this customer. So there were very successful implementations with this technology. Obviously, there were also implementations which were not that successful, like it is with any technology. But I was working as a Java developer since 6 years prior. And so were the other developers there. And the developers were unhappy. And obviously, as a developer, I know that the most important aspect of any project is to keep its developers happy. Why was that? In 2014, we were already used to doing DevOps. So as a software developer, I was already used to testing the software, obviously. We could, if you're writing a custom development Java software or any other language really, you're having unit tests, you have integration tests, you can run your tests in a pipeline, you can run them hopefully locally too, and you have a quick and easy way of validating that your software is working as intended. If you have a big part of your software is just monolithically installed in some staging environment, this gets harder because you have a dependency to a piece of software that is running somewhere else in the cloud, on another server. So you have, if every developer wants to run unit tests, then you either have to segment that installation for each developer, or you risk using the same resources doing your tests. So 2 developers just start unit tests on their machines at the same time. Now you collide because you are testing against the same centralized system. We were already used to containerize our applications. So again, a classic Java development project. You package your application into a Docker image, and there you have a fixed software state, you have a fixed infrastructure in that container. You can test it, and you can stage it. You can just throw this artifact that you built into the next stage and test it there. And if it's tested well there too, then you can just ship it in production. So it's the same artifact. You don't build staging environments and configure them similarly anymore. And this is one of the great improvements of the last 20 years, I think. that we can do this, that we have a simple way of testing, staging, and shipping our applications as one entity. And many build tools are concentrating on that fact. But the engine we were using was too big to containerize and ship it. So I heard that IBM managed to make their suite, which is now called IBM BAW, run on Kubernetes. So they have containerized it after all. But it was not possible to treat every environment where the application was running, including the local developers' computers, as one environment which was just encapsulated. And what issues did we see? We had configuration errors because those WebSphere installations in Dev 1, Dev 2, Staging 1, Staging 2, and Staging 3 were just individual software systems which were installed and configured on those environments. And if you do this manually or can't really automate this, then you risk having different configurations in different environments or even different software versions in different environments. We had that once. As I already said, conflicts on dev systems. If your development systems are centralized, for example, in the cloud or on a server that was specifically set up for development, and many developers work on the same part of the software, then you start locking your processes and you start getting conflicts. For example, if I wanted to work on a process which was ordering debit cards, I opened it up. And if my colleague wanted to work on that, the engine said, this is locked, in the best case. In the worst case, the engine let the other developer start work on that too. And when the last of us who saved was the winner. Yeah? That's better locking, please. And as I already said, it's hard to test automatically, which led to problems with software quality. If you cannot just run a unit test suite to verify the state of your software, but you need manual testing or integration tests with UI automation, you run your tests less often. I think you would agree there. So if a test takes 2 hours because you need to install it somewhere, you need to start a UI automation framework, and all those processes need to be run end to end in the black box, especially for the processes, then you test less often, you test less thoroughly, and then you might get issues in software quality. And in the end, this impacted our delivery speed. If you have a team of 5 developers, but only one developer can really work on the same process at the same time, and you cannot do different implement different features on the same resource, because you cannot merge it and your development system is centralized, then you might have a problem. And it was even more frustrating because as software developers, we knew that these issues were solved years ago, ages ago, by DevOps, by software testing suites and testing approaches. So 3 years later, we had a first Camunda project. We heard of this, and as a Java developer, I obviously was very, very keen on getting my hands on this. And the first time I saw that you could write unit test against BPMN processes and even get coverage, this was just mind-blowing because all the years before, we were working on a centralized environment, and there was really no way to do such testing. And now we were able to do this because an embedded engine, we could just integrate into our Java applications, and we could use all the tools we were used to. We could test with JUnit. We could do integration testing with Arquillium, Robo framework maybe, not at that time. We could run all the tests in a pipeline. We could Dockerize our application and ship it into different stages and test it there. So all of the tools we were already used to, we could use again. Not even speaking about if you are building a product and you want to ship BPMN capabilities with your product to the customer, this is now very easily possible because shipping some big centralized BPM engine, which might also be expensive, it's not open source, to your client is often not a good solution. You can maybe try to offer it as a SaaS solution, but again, not easy to do. So this is obviously a very loaded question. Who decides to introduce a centralized BPMN engine into a company? I would say the architect maybe sometimes, but it's often selected as a strategic approach because it's a big event, right? You decide you need this big event, this big engine that you have to set up, which is used by many different applications. You don't decide this as a development team. This is a strategic decision to introduce a new product to fulfill a new aim in the company. So it's often part of a process management strategy, which is expensive because you need to plan a lot. But on the plus side, it can also be a good thing to have the C-suite bought into the idea of BPMN from the very beginning, right? Makes your life easier. So the important people want that. That's good. Then you have enough pressure and enough money behind that to really lift it off the ground. Who decides to introduce an embeddable engine? In my experience, Camunda, as an embeddable engine, was in the past often introduced as some kind of grassroots movement into companies. Because developers went to conferences and they saw talks by Bernd and by others. And they said, oh, I can use this in my existing application. The barrier of entry is very, very low. I can just embed it into my application, I have a running BPMN engine, and I don't even need to adapt my testing, my staging. I can just ship it with my application, and I don't need to change anything in testing, in the pipeline, or the runtime. So you can just try it out. It's just a library. People have said that. I was in projects where people who might have been me suggested introducing a process engine to an existing application to solve some issues. And people say, okay, cool, it's just a library. We can just make a Spike project and test how it works. And this is, in every company, a little BPMN seedling you plant, right? And that is growing and growing and growing. And it's a way for you to introduce BPMN into an organization from bottom to top, not from top to bottom. It's a small upfront investment. Of course, you need development hours. Maybe you buy the license from the beginning. And if you are not planning BPMN as a big strategic approach, obviously you need discipline, that your garden doesn't look like this, right? You cannot just start, everybody does BPMN and does their own tunnel vision on their processes, and other departments have their tunnel vision on their other processes. But you can make it work, and I have seen many companies make it work. So am I now saying that centralized engines are bad, useless, and nobody should use them? Obviously, no. They exist, and there's a reason for them to exist. And this is not one of those talks that says our solution is good and every other solution is bad. I think it can make way for easier collaboration. If your development system is centralized, then you often have features where you can comment on those centralized resources. So developers, business experts can just comment models on that centralized solution. They can work there together and have a shared view. There is no development system one first needs to set up. If you are working with Operaton and you have it in your Java application, then it's quite hard for the requirement engineers to check the state in your code. You need to show them to them or have really good documentation. And here they could, in theory, look into the system really easily. Often, those centralized systems have a way easier way of doing unified monitoring and control. If you have that big centralized engine and everything is running on this engine instance or in a cluster, then it's easy for you to just have a dashboard there and see everything that's going on in your company. If you have 20 small process engines running in their own applications and you want a unified vision on what is going on in your company, you need to build extra stuff. You can just maybe hook into the history event stream and stream all the history into a centralized place. All the information is siloed there, and you need a way of getting out of this silo to view it as a whole. And if this is your thing, then those centralized engines often have easier way of integrating low-code features because they can be configured centrally in one place. So if you have worked with Camunda 8 as an example, there are all of those connectors I would consider low-code-ish, which you can connect to any systems. You just configure the environment variables one time in the engine, and everybody who wants to, for example, write an MS Teams message can just use the MS Teams connector, which is already configured and will call the right endpoint for the environment. In my opinion, this is a little easier in centralized approaches. And one benefit for the people who provide those solutions, they are marketable as a software as a service system, as we have seen with Camunda, as IBM is trying to do. If it is just a software you install at one point and everything uses this, this is cloud ready. It is easily to ship this as a cloud product where users could connect to. In summary, no, embedded engines are not per se better than centralized engines, but they are not worse. There are different tools for different jobs. And I personally am very, very glad that our little embedded engine that we took over from Camunda still exists. I have seen and talked to many people who told us that they would not be able to move to a different architectural style, either because they are shipping applications to end users, or they cannot have this big setup, or even because there are even very, very small shops. A friend of mine has a customer who was a former Camunda customer, and he's a barber. He has a barber shop, and he is running 20 processes on a small Camunda instance, or now Operaton instance, in his barber shop. I don't think he would have become a cloud customer. And yeah, he's not paying for it. It's obviously because it's open source. But it's a use case that is small enough to run on his small home server somewhere in the toilet of his barbershop. And I think this is just great that it's possible to do this, and that this engine continues to exist, so they can do that. In any case, thank you very much. And I think we have 3 minutes left if you have any questions or remarks. Thank you. Yes. Sorry. Yes, that's the confusion. So I'm listed as Otus GmbH. Otus is a joint venture or a subsidiary of Lambda Schmiede, my other company, and I just had no time to prepare fresh slides with the new logo yet.